reforms, I think he will only steer it to recapture the state.
Okay.
And reintroduce the old methods again,
okay.
Just for the sake that the status quo continues. I don't think that is a feasible option for President Saleh.
Okay. Khalid Loom in Boston, looking at what comes next, what comes ahead. A lot of the fears from many Western commentators and Western leaders and policymakers is the incompatibility, as they would put it, between Islamism and secular liberal democracy. We get the example that they tend to use of Hamas winning the elections in the Palestinian elections in 2006. But at the genesis of their fears is always the example of Algeria in that election, which triggered the civil war. I mean, is that a fair parallel that they make? And how much has the Algerian political landscape changed since those dark days?
I think that in the particular case of Algeria, and I think in Egypt as well, there is an exaggeration of the possibility of the repeat of what happened in 1992 in Algeria. Recently in Algeria, and by recently I mean the last 15 years, you've really had the practical extermination of the political force of the FIS, which was the party that won those elections in 1992. There's been a series of amnesties over the last 10 years that have been geared towards allowing people to take basically be absolved of the political ramifications of having been members of the FIS or having been members of the Islamist movement, while being given some kind of guarantee that they won't participate in politics. So they'll be given a little bit of money, maybe they'll be given a stipend, and they'll be told, don't speak up on politics, don't participate. Those who do participate, or who, I should say rather, those who do speak up, usually get whisked away and are arrested pretty quickly, then released, because they've learned their lesson, as someone in government might say. What you have now in government, you have the FLN, the RND, which are two basically secular political parties, establishment parties, and then the third party in the coalition is the MSP, or the Muslim Brotherhood, the Algerian Muslim Brotherhood, which is a pretty moderate party. Outside of that, the opposition is practically devoid of any organized Islamist force. They've been demoralized, they've been largely discredited because there are some of them who have participated in electoral processes through the MSP. And so most people in Algeria are completely divorced from the opposition as well as the government. The elections are seen as a sham, and people really aren't looking to participate in the system as it stands.
It seems as if it's a pretty bleak political landscape. I want to tap into our inbox for a bit. There's an email from Asif Rana from Hounslow in the UK, and he asks, what is the likelihood of Saudi Arabia, the most repressive regime in the region, seeing protests on its streets? Let's ask Anas Katish about that. Anas, what do you think?
Yes, I think it's highly unlikely. There has been some people demanding more women's rights or accountability for people responsible for the people who died in floods in Jeddah and Riyadh. But I think people revolt out of hunger. And country being, Saudi being the rich oil country that it is, it's highly unlikely that we'll see a similar popular movement as we've seen in Tunisia or in Egypt.
Okay.
So I think it's just not a possibility.
Okay, let's take another phone call. Mohammed from California. Mohammed, go ahead.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Hello, Mohammed. Go
Hello?
ahead.
Yeah. I go back to when you asked the question about the reference. I think for Algeria or other country like Syria, nothing happened like you said. Basically, it's Tunisia is not the reference for these people to go out in the street and get what they want. Basically, they are waiting for Egypt and what can happen from Egypt. And basically, also there is the second thing. It seems like it's a little bit strange what happened in Tunisia, and we want to know exactly directly who gave the order to Zain al-Abidin to leave the country. Did really the people giving him, or there is insider from the military who force him? They have to leave, and they have to do the exchange. Because that's basically the question. I saw the media, they didn't really take that seriously, or they don't have information.
Okay, fair enough. Mohammed, I'll pose that to our guests. I'll ask Dr. Saaduddin Talib, about that. Mohammed making the point that Tunisia is not really the reference. Egypt is. Everybody's watching Egypt. And he asked, I mean, Mohammed is suggesting that there were other hands at play to tell Zain al-Abidin bin Ali to leave the country. What do you think?
I agree that Egypt is a better reference to the Arab world. That does not deny that Tunisia is another point of reference. If I remember that the concessions that were made by President Saleh, for instance, were first attempted after the Tunisian revolution, and when Egypt was only beginning to rise. Now, if the Egyptians themselves are doing this because of what happened in Tunisia, that is a huge encouragement to the Egyptian people, and they were carrying the flags of Tunisia. And therefore, but that does not exclude that Egypt is a change in Egypt, and I mean good change in Egypt, will open the floodgates of Arab spirit in the streets to actually get rid of most of the regimes that have been practicing corruption, and they have been not delivering services to their people like they should have, and they've taken unacceptable positions in different political issues. So therefore, I think still that Egypt is the major place to look for, and I believe that the change that has already happened in Egypt will be followed by bigger change in other countries.
Okay, let's go to Anas Katish in Boston. Anas, I want to ask you about a big non-Arab power that in many ways is at the heart of all events related to the Middle East, Iran. Do you think that the Iranian leadership has been disingenuous here because they're championing and claiming the protesters, yet they have their own problems with regards to political dissidents and an internal crackdown on political agitation?
Mm-hmm. I think it's very understandable that the Iranian regime would be cheering on the Egyptian protesters. After all, the Mubarak regime was a natural enemy, let's say, of Iran, along with maybe Saudi. And for Iran, if Mubarak goes down, it's more likely that whoever succeeds him will be a better ally, let's say. So it's perfectly normal that the Iranian regime are supporting them. And just today they announced that they did not, from Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, have announced that he was late on announcing support for Egyptian protesters because they were afraid that they would be linked with outside forces, whether it be Hezbollah, Iran, or Hamas, or even Israel or the US, as the governmental state TV in Egypt is trying to promote.
Yeah, I mean, this is what makes it all the more fascinating, because it's not just state relations, it's state and non-state actors that come into the mix with regards to every uprising and revolt in the region. Let's go to Khalid Loam. Khalid, we keep focusing on the political heads of state in each country and their similarities. What about the armies? Would we possibly see the armies of other countries, if there's a massive Egypt-like or Tunisia-like revolt, would we see the armies taking a similar role to the role we saw in Tunisia and Egypt?
The role that you see the Tunisian military taking, I think, owes to the very specific context that Tunisia's uprising took place and the very specific nature of their military. In a country like Algeria, a country like Libya, where the military really is very close to the political leadership, and in some ways is the political leadership, I think you can trust that these militaries will not tolerate a deviating course. In Algeria in particular, you see that the political decision makers are heavily drawn from the military and have been ever since the 1960s. In many cases are long serving and have been at the helm of power since at least 1990. So I would look at these countries as having a very heavy military influence already, and I would argue that the role that the Egyptian military has played has been is rather instructive. That they have been sort of stepping into the fray behind the scenes and trying to steer the political development in a direction that preserves the regime rather than offers a fundamental concession to the crowds. Currently, or I should say last month when we had the uprisings in Algeria, you saw that the military was hesitant to become involved directly because in the past the military's involvement in politics has been much more overt and has been associated